It's the Flow FM morning show with Ricky Lambert. I mentioned earlier in the program when we were talking about our former Prime Ministers and the example of David Cameron in the UK found himself on the board of Greensill, which is a financier that supports the parent company of the Whyalla steelworks, and Mr Gupta, who was hailed as a saviour for Whyalla, but it's just looking a little wobbly at the moment. And the South Australian Labor opposition have been very sharp on this front. Mr Peter Malinauskas headed out to the Whyalla steelworks a couple of weeks ago to show his support and take a selfie video on the factory floor to show that he's there with the workers to support them. And this morning a press release has come out from the Shadow Treasurer Stephen Mullighan and the local member for the seat of Giles, which encompasses Whyalla and surrounding districts, Mr Eddie Hughes. Mr Mullighan says that the Whyalla steelworks are vital to the South Australian economy and of course to the Whyalla community, and says every effort must be made to save the steelworks, especially when South Australia has the highest unemployment rate in the nation. He says Stephen Marshall should be meeting with the federal government and developing options to help the steelworks continue. Mr Mullighan noted that the former government stepped in to help prop up the Port Pirie smelter. A local member, Eddie Giles, says that the steelworks are Whyalla's largest employer, and this current uncertainty reverberates across the whole community. He says their community also had to weather the Arium administration 5 years ago, and says this uncertainty is something that their community also does not need. I have to give credit here to Mr Rex Patrick, Senator for South Australia, who I interviewed about this matter and who was out pretty early calling for some support from the Prime Minister for the Whyalla steelworks. And I did put to him in an interview I did on Flow News 24, which you can find on the Flow News 24 podcast channel. I raised with him the possibility that the financial arrangements surrounding Greensill could well see another financier step in because they're legally obliged to, and stump up the money that Greensill seems to be unable to provide for Liberty Steel and Mr Gupta's operations. So that's still to be played out in the courts, but of course some political operatives are trying to make some noise at this moment to support the Whyalla community. There may well be a case for the federal government to step in and provide some support. And to this end, I think the policy statement of Mr Albanese, the federal opposition leader, is worth revisiting, where he has said recently that Labor, if they were in government, would establish a new National Reconstruction Fund to reverse the decline in manufacturing and secure jobs for Australians. This policy initiative from Labor, I think, is a good one, because in these times where we're recovering from a pandemic, we do need to look at how we can ensure we have local supply chains for some of our critical industries and not be so heavily reliant on imports. When you consider the serious supply problems that the timber industry is facing for housing construction because of government stimulus in the housing area, maintaining one of Australia's major steel manufacturing operations is certainly a worthy cause.